The morning after the kiss is different. The air in the apartment has lost its jagged edge, replaced by a quiet, buzzing energy that makes every shared glance feel like a secret. Jikook is the first one in the kitchen, but he's not strategizing or lurking today. He's leaning against the counter, staring at the coffee machine with a dazed expression until Jimin walks in. Jimin stops at the doorway, his hair a mess of sleep-disordered blonde strands. He looks at Jikook, and for a second, the old habit of bracing for a snarky remark flickers in his mind. Instead, Jungkook's eyes soften instantly. He reaches out, catching Jimin by the waist as he passes, pulling him into a brief, solid hug. "You're late," Jungkook mumbles into the crown of Jimin's head. Jimin laughs, his hands finding purchase on Jungkook's forearms. "I'm exactly on time for someone who was kept up half the night by a very talkative roommate." Jungkook pulls back just enough to look at him, a playful smirk dancing on his lips. "Talkative? I don't remember much talking happening toward the end." They settle into a new routine, one where the competition doesn't die, but the malice does. They still argue over the best way to frame a shot or the most efficient way to organize the fridge, but the arguments end in laughter or lingering touches rather than slammed doors. Later that afternoon, they're sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by storyboards for their separate projects. "I think your protagonist needs a reason to stay," Jungkook says, pointing to Jimin's sketches. "Right now, he's just running. Give him a reason to stop." Jimin looks at the drawing, then at Jungkook. "A reason to stop, huh? Like a rival who turns out to be a decent human being." Jungkook nudges Jimin's shoulder with his own. "Something like that. Only if he's a asterisk, really asterisk good rival." As the sun begins to set, casting long, orange shadows across the room, Jimin sets his pen down. He looks at the 1-week calendar they had jokingly marked on the fridge. "The week is almost up," Jimin notes quietly. Jungkook doesn't look away from his work, but his hand reaches out, finding Jimin's and lacing their fingers together. "The truce is over, Jimin." Jimin's heart stutters. "Oh, back to hating each other then." Jungkook finally looks up, his gaze intense and unwavering. He squeezes Jimin's hand, the contact grounded and sure. "No, I think we're moving on to something permanent. I'm not going back to space, and I'm definitely not going back to being alone in this place." Jimin leans in, resting his chin on Jungkook's shoulder. "Good, because I was really starting to like the way you season the food." "Is that all?" Jungkook teases. "And the way you look when you're trying to win," Jimin whispers. "But mostly the food." Jungkook laughs, pulling Jimin closer. The rivalry is still there. They'll always be each other's fiercest competitors. But the apartment is no longer a battlefield. It's home. The permanent shift in their dynamic doesn't mean the sparks have died out. If anything, the fire is just getting started. But now, the heat comes from a place of belonging rather than defense. Rain streaks against the window of their shared living room, blurring the city lights into a smear of gold and blue. Inside, the atmosphere is warm. Jimin is curled up on one end of the sofa with a book, while Jungkook has claimed the other end, his head resting comfortably in Jimin's lap as he scrolls through his phone. Every few minutes, Jimin's fingers absent-mindedly card through Jungkook's dark hair. It's a gesture that would have been unthinkable a week ago. Yet now it feels as natural as breathing. You're staring again, Jungkook murmurs, not even looking up from his screen. Jimin doesn't bother denying it. He lets his hand rest against Jungkook's temple. I'm allowed to. We're roommates. Remember, I'm just inspecting the property. Jungkook lets out a low, vibrating chuckle that Jimin feels against his thighs. He finally puts his phone down and looks up, eyes dark and focused. And how's the inspection going? Jimin leans down, his hair falling forward to curtain their faces from the rest of the world. Everything seems to be in working order, though the owner is a bit of a brat. Jungkook's hand reaches up, his fingers hooking into the collar of Jimin's sweater to pull him just an inch closer. A brat. I thought I was the talented rival you couldn't keep your eyes off of. You're both, Jimin whispers, his lips hovering just above Jungkook's. That's the problem. The playful banter fades, replaced by that familiar, heavy pull. Jungkook sits up slowly, never breaking eye contact, until they are face to face in the dim light. He reaches out, his thumb tracing the curve of Jimin's bottom lip. I spent 3 years trying to outrun this, Jungkook admits, his voice thick with honesty. I thought if I won, if I was better than you, I wouldn't have to feel like this. But the closer I got to the top, the more I realized I only wanted to be there if you were standing right next to me. Jimin feels a lump form in his throat. He reaches out, cupping Jungkook's face with both hands. Well, I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me, Kook. Through every project, every competition, and every burnt dinner. Jungkook smiles, a real wide smile that reaches his eyes, and leans in to press a soft, lingering kiss to Jimin's forehead before pulling him into a tight embrace. I think I finally won, Jungkook mumbles into Jimin's shoulder. Jimin hugs him back just as hard, closing his eyes and finally letting the last of the tension melt away. Yeah, Jungkook, I think we both did. The rivalry remains, but the war is over. In the quiet of their apartment, surrounded by half-finished stories and shared coffee mugs, they finally found the one thing they couldn't compete for. Asterisk, asterisk, each other. The aftermath of the win feels like a long-awaited exhale. The apartment, once divided by invisible lines and territorial disputes, has finally become a single, cohesive space. The rain from the night before has left the air crisp and clear. Jimin wakes up to the sound of something clattering in the kitchen. Not the aggressive, sharp sounds of a rival making a point, but the clumsy, rhythmic sounds of someone trying to be quiet and failing. He walks out to find Jungkook at the stove, wearing a pair of Jimin's gray sweatpants that are definitely too short for him. He's flipping pancakes with a level of intensity usually reserved for a final exam. Those look edible, Jimin teases, leaning against the doorframe and crossing his arms. Jungkook doesn't look up, but a small smirk tugs at his lips. They're more than edible. They're a masterpiece. I'm practicing for the best roommate title. I heard the competition is stiff. Jimin walks over, sliding his arms around Jungkook's waist from behind and resting his cheek against his broad back. The competition just forfeited. You win by default. Later that morning, they find themselves back at the dining table, but the atmosphere is entirely different. Instead of 2 laptops acting as shields between them, they've pushed the chairs together. Look at this, Jungkook says, turning his tablet so Jimin can see a new character design. I was thinking, what if we merged our next projects? A joint submission. Jimin's eyes widen. For years, the idea of sharing credit with his rival would have been a nightmare. Now, looking at Jungkook's sharp lines and thinking of his own narrative flow, it feels like the most logical thing in the world. A collaboration. Jimin muses, his hand finding Jungkook's under the table. The faculty would lose their minds. They love our feud. Let them, Jungkook shrugs, leaning in to brush his nose against Jimin's. I'm bored of fighting you. I'd rather see what happens when we're on the same side.